Imagine moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood. Perfect lawns, freshly painted fences, holiday lights twinkling in perfect order. The kind of place where every mailbox is identical and the Homeowners Association, better known as the HOA, runs the show. Now imagine walking through that same neighborhood with a lion by your side. Not a symbol, not a mascot, a real, living, breathing lion. This is the story of Sarah, a woman who found herself caught in the most unbelievable suburban battle you could imagine. On one side, her deep, unshakable bond with Leo, a lion she raised and loved like family. On the other, a homeowners association determined to control every detail of life on her street, even if it meant tearing that bond apart. What began as whispers and suspicious glances soon exploded into a full-scale war of rules, fear, and power. Neighbors divided. The HOA president grew obsessed. And in the middle of it all was Sarah, standing firm, unwilling to give up the one being she loved most. This isn't just a story about an HOA. It's about control. It's about courage. And it's about what happens when ordinary suburban life collides with something extraordinary and unforgettable. So settle in, because over the next chapters, you'll hear a tale of loyalty, conflict, betrayal, and survival. Every neighborhood has its secrets. Some hide broken marriages. Some hide debt. Some hide quiet resentment behind perfect lawns and painted shutters. Mine hid a lion. His name was Leo, and he was the most extraordinary thing about my very ordinary life. Most people looked at my small beige house at the corner of Willow Creek Estates and saw nothing remarkable. The shutters were regulation brown, the grass trimmed to 3 inches, and the driveway clear of oil stains, the kind of picture the HOA board loved. But behind the privacy fence, beyond the sight of wandering neighbors and the watchful eyes of Richard Coleman, our HOA president, there was something no one in suburbia would believe. A full-grown, 300-pound lion. Leo wasn't supposed to be here. By all logic, by all rules, he belonged somewhere wild, somewhere untamed. But fate had other plans. Years ago, I worked overseas with a wildlife rescue program. A tiny cub, half-starved and abandoned, came into my care. I fed him bottles, wrapped him in blankets, and carried him when he was too weak to walk. Against the odds, he survived. Against every warning, I bonded with him. By the time I returned home to the States, I couldn't leave him behind. Permits, paperwork, endless legal hoops. I went through them all. Somehow I managed it. Leo came with me, and he grew up not as a beast of the wild but as my family. He lived in a reinforced enclosure in the backyard, complete with shade, toys, and a den. I spared no expense in making sure he was cared for properly. He wasn't a circus act. He wasn't a petting zoo attraction. He was just Leo, my companion, my secret. For a while it worked. The neighbors didn't notice. Or maybe they noticed something but chose to ignore it. They'd hear a low rumble late at night and tell themselves it was thunder. They'd see the butcher's truck drop off large bags of meat and assume I was hosting big barbecues. Denial can be a powerful thing, but secrets never last forever. It happened on a summer evening. I was hosing down Leo's enclosure when I realized I wasn't alone. My neighbor's son, a curious 10-year-old, was staring through a knothole in the fence. His eyes went wide. His mouth dropped open. And before I could stop him, he shouted, "Mom! There's a lion in here." Within 24 hours, everyone on the street knew. At first, it was whispers. People walking their dogs slowed down in front of my house. Cars drove by twice, as if trying to confirm what they'd heard. I saw curtains twitching when I stepped outside. And then came the HOA. The letter arrived in a crisp white envelope, stamped with the Willow Creek Estates logo. Violation notice. Prohibited animal on property. Immediate removal required. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the paper while Leo purred softly from his den outside. My hands shook. They wanted him gone. And for the first time, I realized I was about to fight not just for my right to keep Leo, but for the very life we'd built together. The war with the HOA had begun. The letter was only the beginning. By the time I folded it back into its envelope, I already knew who was behind it. Richard Coleman, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek Estates. If perfection had a human form, Richard thought he was it. His lawn looked like it had been carved by lasers. His mailbox gleamed like polished steel, and his eyes, sharp, cold, calculating, missed nothing. I wasn't surprised when, the next morning, he showed up at my door, clipboard in hand. Tie too tight for a Saturday. Sarah, he said smoothly, though his smile never touched his eyes. We need to talk about your situation. I didn't answer right away. Behind me, Leo's low rumble drifted through the screen door. It wasn't a threat, just his way of saying he knew a stranger was near. Richard's smile faltered for a split second. Your animal, he went on, tightening his grip on the clipboard. It violates several community bylaws. Section 14, subsection C, to be precise. No exotic or dangerous pets are permitted on the premises. For the safety of residents, you'll need to remove it immediately. I crossed my arms. Leo isn't dangerous. He's contained. He's licensed. And he's family. Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. Licenses don't matter here. This is a community and we have standards. I've already had 3 complaints. Children are afraid. Parents are concerned. If you don't comply, fines will begin immediately, $50 a day. And if necessary, we'll escalate. There it was. The threat. I could feel my pulse pounding, but I refused to look away. You don't get to decide who's family to me, I said quietly. Richard scribbled something on his clipboard. We'll see about that. And then he left, crisp shoes clicking against the pavement, the sound echoing like a gavel. The fines started the very next week. Envelopes piled up, red ink, bold letters, final warning. The amount climbed higher and higher, turning into numbers that made my stomach twist. I ignored them. Leo was worth more than any dollar amount. But Richard didn't stop at letters. One afternoon, I came home from work to find 3 strangers standing at my property line. They wore polos with the HOA emblem stitched on the chest, and they were snapping photos of Leo's enclosure, measuring the height of the fencing, whispering as Leo watched them curiously from inside. I stormed over. What do you think you're doing? Official inspection, one replied. The board has authorized us to document the hazard. Hazard? I snapped. He's in a reinforced enclosure, safer than your backyard pools. They didn't answer, just clicked more pictures, then left with smug nods. That night, another letter arrived. This one wasn't a fine. It was a notice of legal action. The HOA board was considering suing me for endangering the community. Word spread fast. At the mailbox, neighbors avoided eye contact. Some whispered as I passed. Kids who once played with my children now crossed the street. But not everyone turned away. Mrs. Parker, my elderly neighbor, knocked on my door with a casserole dish and a kind smile. He's magnificent, she whispered after glancing at Leo through the fence. Don't let them bully you. But others weren't so gentle. One night, a brick clattered against my fence. When I picked it up, I found a note tied around it. Get rid of the lion or else. I lay awake that night, listening to Leo's steady breathing from his den, wondering how far Richard was willing to go. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for Friday. Richard would be there, clipboard ready, with his rules and his smug authority. And for the first time, I realized this fight wasn't just about Leo anymore. It was about power, about control, about one man deciding who belonged and who didn't. And I wasn't about to let him win. The HOA board meeting was like a courtroom without the judge's robe. Rows of folding chairs filled the community center, neighbors whispering, arms crossed, eyes darting toward me as I walked in. At the front sat the board members, Richard Coleman in the middle, his clipboard resting like a weapon across his lap. He cleared his throat. We're here to address a pressing issue, the presence of a dangerous exotic animal in Willow Creek Estates. The room buzzed with murmurs. I stood, clutching my notes, my heart hammering. Before I could speak, a man from the 3rd row raised his hand. My kids can't even play outside anymore, he complained. What if that thing gets loose? It's a lion, for crying out loud. Others nodded. A woman in yoga pants chimed in. I hear it at night. That roar, it's terrifying. This isn't a zoo. It's a neighborhood. The tide was against me already. I felt the weight of every stare. But then, from the back, a voice rose, steady, firm. Mrs. Parker. Leo is no threat, she said. I've seen him. He's calm, well cared for. Sarah has done nothing wrong. If anything, this lion is safer than half the guard dogs in this place. A murmur of agreement trickled through a few corners of the room. Mr. Alvarez, the retired firefighter, stood next. Look, I've dealt with dangerous situations. I know the difference between a hazard and a responsibility. Sarah is doing this right. She's not reckless. For a moment, hope flared in me. Maybe not everyone saw Leo as a monster, but Richard's smile was sharp as broken glass. Neighbors, I hear your concerns, but the facts are simple. An apex predator has no place here. Today it's calm. Tomorrow, who knows? This is about safety, about protecting our children. He turned to me, eyes glinting. Sarah, why don't you tell us why you believe your personal attachment outweighs the collective safety of this community? I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Leo isn't just a pet. He's family. I rescued him when he was a cub. I raised him. I've built a safe, reinforced enclosure that exceeds legal requirements. He's licensed. He's loved. And he's never hurt anyone. You talk about community, but community means standing by each other, not tearing someone apart because they're different. Silence hung heavy after my words. Then came the eruption. Voices overlapping, arguments bouncing like firecrackers. Some shouted in support. Others shouted in fear. The board struggled to keep order. And in the chaos, the neighborhood began to split. On one side, Richard and those who feared Leo. On the other, neighbors who believed in fairness, in compassion, in me. By the end of the night, no decision was made. Richard slammed his gavel, declaring the matter unresolved and postponed to the next meeting. But the damage was done. The neighborhood wasn't united anymore. Lines had been drawn, friendships strained. Some people waved at me kindly the next morning. Others turned their backs. And through it all, Leo remained calm, watching from his enclosure, unaware that he had become the center of a battle that would decide our future in Willow Creek Estates. The neighborhood never felt the same after that meeting. It was as though Willow Creek Estates had split down the middle. Each driveway, each mailbox, each trimmed hedge seemed to belong to one side or the other. You could feel it in the air, thick, tense, like a thunderstorm that never quite broke. For every smile of support, there was a glare of accusation. For every casserole dish from Mrs. Parker, there was a muttered insult from across the street. Even the children picked up on it. Some waved shyly at me, whispering about how cool it was that I had a lion. Others crossed the road, their parents dragging them away as though even proximity to my house was a risk. And Richard wasn't done. One morning, as I was loading bags of meat into Leo's freezer, a white van pulled up. Out stepped two men in animal control uniforms, clipboards in hand. Richard trailed behind them, his smug smile already telling me everything I needed to know. Ma'am, one officer began, we received a complaint about an exotic animal being kept on this property. We'll need to inspect the enclosure and verify permits. My stomach dropped. You can look at the paperwork, I said firmly, handing over the thick folder I kept ready for situations exactly like this. Licenses, veterinary reports, reinforced design blueprints, I had it all. But Richard wasn't interested in papers. He wanted fear. He wanted drama. He motioned to the enclosure. Go on, take a look. See if this is safe for a 300-pound predator. Leo padded forward, golden mane glinting in the sunlight. He didn't roar, didn't growl. He simply sat, watching them with calm, regal eyes. The officers froze for a moment, awe flickering across their faces. Then one cleared his throat. The enclosure appears secure. Reinforced steel, double locks, perimeter fencing. Honestly, this is more secure than most zoological facilities. Richard's face darkened. But what about the noise? The intimidation? That's not measurable on paper. The officer glanced at him coolly. Noise ordinances cover that, not HOA rules. He handed my folder back to me. You're within legal compliance, ma'am. We can't intervene. The van drove off, leaving Richard fuming at the curb. He didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me. He just stormed back to his house, shoulders stiff with rage. That night, I found a new letter in my mailbox. This one wasn't from the HOA board. It was from Richard himself, typed in neat, sharp letters. This is not over. You may have the law, but I have the neighborhood. Remove the lion, or you'll regret it. My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't just about fines anymore. It was personal. Over the next weeks, the hostility escalated. Someone spray-painted "Beast" on my fence. Another time, I woke up to find my trash cans overturned, garbage scattered across the lawn. A cruel prank, but one that sent a clear message. They wanted me out. Yet for every act of cruelty, there was kindness. Mrs. Parker brought extra groceries, worried I'd be too shaken to shop. Mr. Alvarez dropped by to reinforce part of Leo's gate, muttering about neighbors with too much time and not enough heart. And one teenage girl from down the street slipped me a note. Don't give up. He's beautiful. It was these small sparks of humanity that kept me standing, even as the storm around me grew fiercer. Richard, however, wasn't just content with intimidation. At the next HOA meeting, he unveiled his masterstroke, a proposal to amend the community bylaws. A new clause, written specifically with me in mind. No resident shall harbor or maintain any animal classified as an exotic or wild species, regardless of permits or enclosures. If it passed, Leo's very existence in Willow Creek would be illegal. The room exploded into debate. Supporters shouted about fairness and overreach. Opponents screamed about safety and fear. I sat in the center of it all, my hands clenched, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about letters and fines anymore. This was war, fought not with fists but with words, rules, and fear. And as I looked across the room at Richard Coleman, smiling like a king on his throne, I knew one thing for certain. The battle for Leo had only just begun. By the time the board announced the vote on Richard's new bylaw, the entire neighborhood was on edge. Sidewalk conversations turned into arguments. Backyard barbecues ended in shouting matches. Even the local Facebook group became a battlefield, every post either defending me or calling for Leo's removal. I tried to stay calm, but the pressure was crushing. Each day felt like walking a tightrope. I knew the bylaw wasn't just about safety, it was about power. Richard wanted to prove that no one could defy him, and I had become the symbol of that defiance. It was a Thursday evening when the real breaking point came. I was cooking dinner when a sudden, sharp sound echoed from outside metal on metal. My stomach clenched. I dropped the spoon and ran to the back door. The sight froze me in place. Two teenage boys, faces half hidden under hoodies, were rattling at Leo's enclosure, yanking on the gate as if trying to pry it open. Leo, startled, stood tall inside, letting out a deep roar that rolled across the neighborhood like thunder. "Hey!" I screamed, racing outside. "Get away from there!" The boys bolted, tripping over each other as they fled into the night. But the damage was done. Neighbors' lights flicked on, curtains pulled back, and within minutes, Richard was there, storming up the sidewalk with that ever-present clipboard. "This is exactly what I've been warning about," he shouted, his voice carrying. "The lion is a danger. Look how it terrifies the children. Look how it attracts trouble. He's not the problem." I shot back, my voice cracking with fury. Those kids could have been hurt if they broke in. Leo did nothing wrong. He was defending himself, but Richard had the crowd. Neighbors gathered, murmuring, nodding. Fear has a way of drowning out reason. By the next morning, the HOA had called an emergency meeting. The room was overflowing, hotter and louder than I'd ever seen it. Richard stood at the front, righteous fire in his voice. "This is the last straw. Last night, that animal could have broken free. We cannot live in fear anymore. We must act." I stood, gripping the edges of the podium until my knuckles turned white. Leo didn't break free. He didn't hurt anyone. The danger wasn't him. It was the kids who trespassed and provoked him. If you punish anyone, punish them, not my lion. But Richard was prepared. He held up photos of the boys' footprints, of the dented lock on the gate, of neighbors standing pale and frightened after the roar. "Look at this," he thundered. "Is this the kind of community we want to live in? Where every night we wonder if the beast behind the fence will break loose?" The word beast cut through me like a knife. The board murmured. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked torn. For hours, the arguments went back and forth. Supporters like Mrs. Parker and Mr. Alvarez defended me fiercely, reminding everyone that Leo had never hurt anyone. But fear is contagious, and Richard fed it with every word, every dramatic gesture. By the end, the board announced that the vote on the new bylaw would be moved up. No more delays. 1 week. And if it passed, Leo would have to be removed or worse. That night, I sat by Leo's enclosure, my hand pressed to the reinforced bars. He pressed back, rumbling softly, his amber eyes calm, trusting. He didn't know the storm that surrounded him. Tears stung my eyes. "I don't know if I can win this, buddy," I whispered. "But I swear, I will fight until the end." For the first time since this war began, I wondered if I could actually lose. And the thought of losing Leo was more than I could bear. The week leading up to the vote was the longest of my life. Every sunrise felt like another march toward Judgment Day. I tried to carry on with my routine. Feeding Leo, going to work, smiling at the neighbors who still dared to wave. But the knot in my chest never loosened. Word spread quickly. The HOA's vote would decide everything. If Richard's bylaw passed, Leo would be forced out. Removed, as the official letter phrased it. But we all knew what that meant. There were no sanctuaries nearby, no zoos willing to take him on such short notice. Removal was a polite word for the unthinkable. I couldn't let that happen. So I prepared. I gathered testimonials from veterinarians, wildlife experts, and even the officer who had inspected Leo's enclosure. I printed photos of the reinforced fencing, double-locked gates, and safety measures I'd installed. I even put together a small video showing Leo playing gently with his toys, lying in the sun like an overgrown cat. I wanted them to see him as I saw him, not a beast, but a companion. The night of the vote, the community center was packed. The air buzzed with tension, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Reporters had even shown up. Local news smelled drama, and what better headline than "Suburban Lion Divides Neighborhood." At the front, Richard looked like a general about to lead his troops into battle. His tie was perfectly straight, his clipboard stacked with papers. His smile was thin, triumphant, as though he could already taste victory. The meeting began. Richard launched into his speech, painting Leo as a ticking time bomb. "We cannot gamble with lives," he declared. "This is not personal, it's about safety, about protecting our families. We have a duty to act before tragedy strikes." His words were sharp, rehearsed, laced with fear. The crowd shifted uneasily. Then it was my turn. I stood, palms sweating, heart pounding loud enough I swore everyone could hear it. "Leo is not a danger," I began, forcing my voice to steady. "He's a living being I've cared for since he was a cub. I've met every legal requirement, every safety standard. He has never harmed anyone. What we're talking about here is not safety, it's fear. And fear should not be the law." I played the video. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched Leo rolling on his back, batting at a ball with oversized paws, licking my hand with surprising gentleness. Some smiled, some softened. Even those who had glared at me before looked uncertain now. Mrs. Parker stood next, her voice steady and kind. "This lion is part of our neighborhood. If you take him away, you're not making us safer. You're just tearing apart a family." Mr. Alvarez followed. "If safety is really the concern, then let's talk about solutions, inspections, monitoring, upgrades. But don't punish someone for doing everything right. That's not justice. That's bullying." For the first time, Richard's confident expression faltered. Finally, the board called for the vote. The room fell silent. One by one, the 5 board members raised their hands. Richard first, of course, voting for the bylaw, his hand shooting up like a blade. Another followed him. My stomach dropped. Then Mrs. Kent, the treasurer, hesitated. She looked at me, then at the video still frozen on the projector screen. Slowly, she shook her head. Her hand stayed down. 2 and 2. The final vote belonged to Mr. Henderson, the vice president. He adjusted his glasses, glanced at Richard, then at me. The silence stretched so long it felt like an eternity. My breath caught in my throat, and then his hand stayed down. The bylaw failed. The room erupted, half in cheers, half in outrage. Supporters hugged me, clapped my back, whispered, "You did it." Opponents stormed out, muttering angrily, shooting me glares sharp enough to cut. Richard stood frozen, his face pale with fury, his knuckles white around his clipboard. For once, he had lost. That night, as I sat beside Leo's enclosure, he rubbed his massive head against the bars, purring low and steady. "We did it, buddy," I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. We actually did it. But even in victory, I knew this wasn't the end. Richard wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat gracefully. And something in his eyes, as he stormed out of that meeting, told me he wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Victory should have tasted sweet. The bylaw had failed, Leo was safe, and the community had spoken. But instead of peace, an uneasy tension hung over Willow Creek Estates. The split was deeper than ever. Supporters waved at me with pride, while opponents crossed the street as if I carried plague. And Richard Coleman, he didn't vanish into silence. No, Richard was planning something. I could feel it. The first sign came 3 nights later. I woke to the sound of footsteps in the backyard. My heart pounded as I slipped on shoes and grabbed a flashlight. When I pushed open the back door, the beam of light cut across the yard, and there he was. Richard, standing by Leo's enclosure. At first, I thought he'd come with more inspectors, more notes, more accusations. But no, his hands weren't holding a clipboard. They were holding bolt cutters. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice cracking in the still night. He froze, caught in the glare of my flashlight. Leo, sensing the danger, padded forward, letting out a low, rolling growl that shook the air. Richard's face twisted, not in fear, but in grim determination. "This ends tonight," he spat. "That monster doesn't belong here. I'll prove it to everyone." Before I could move, he snapped the bolt cutters against the lock. The clang echoed like a gunshot. Leo reared back, roaring, the sound so powerful it made my chest vibrate. Neighbors' lights flicked on, curtains pulled back. People were watching, but no one moved fast enough. I lunged, slamming into Richard with everything I had. The bolt cutters flew into the grass. He staggered, but his rage gave him strength. "You'll regret this, Sarah," he hissed, shoving me back. Leo, towering behind the bars, let out another roar. This one so loud, so primal, that Richard finally faltered. His bravado cracked, fear flashing across his face. Within minutes, police sirens wailed down the street. Someone had called them. Red and blue lights flooded the yard as officers jumped from their cars, separating us before the situation could spiral further. The truth came out fast. The damaged lock, the bolt cutters, witnesses who'd seen Richard sneaking into my yard. He tried to spin it, claiming he was protecting the neighborhood. But the evidence was clear. Richard had trespassed. He'd endangered me, and worse, he'd endangered the entire community by trying to provoke Leo. The officers led him away in handcuffs, his face pale with fury, his shouts echoing, "You'll all regret this. You're siding with a beast over your own safety." But the neighbors weren't siding with a beast. They were siding with the truth. In the weeks that followed, things slowly calmed. The graffiti stopped. The threatening letters vanished. Even those who had feared Leo seemed to soften, relieved that the chaos was finally over. The HOA replaced Richard with a new president, one more interested in lawns and fences than power struggles. As for Leo, he remained what he had always been. Calm, regal, loyal. My companion, my family. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson, I sat by his enclosure. He stretched out on the grass, mane glowing in the light, and rumbled a deep, contented purr. You know, I whispered, we didn't just win. We showed them who you really are. He blinked slowly, as if he understood. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what battles might come, we had faced the worst together and we had won. Because Leo wasn't just my lion. He was proof that love, loyalty, and courage could stand against fear. Even in the heart of suburbia. Months passed after that night. Willow Creek Estates slowly returned to what it once was, or at least what it pretended to be. Lawns were trimmed, hedges manicured, holiday lights strung in perfect symmetry. But beneath the neat rows of houses, something had changed forever. Richard Coleman was gone. The courts barred him from returning to the HOA, and without his constant surveillance, the neighborhood seemed to breathe easier. His fall from power became the whispered cautionary tale of every block party. How a man so obsessed with control lost everything in one reckless act. And me? I was still here, still standing, still with Leo. Neighbors who once glared now greeted me with tentative smiles. Some even brought over gifts, bags of meat for Leo, donations toward the upkeep of his enclosure. Children who had once been warned to stay away now gathered, wide-eyed, to watch him from a safe distance, marveling at his golden mane shimmering in the sun. Slowly, the fear was replaced with awe. One afternoon, Mrs. Parker leaned on her cane and smiled at me across the fence. You know, Sarah, people will talk about this for years. Not just about the lion, but about you. About how you didn't give in. Her words stuck with me, because the fight had never just been about Leo. It had been about standing firm in the face of fear, about refusing to let others dictate who you could love, protect, or call family. Now, when I sit by Leo's enclosure in the quiet evenings, I see more than just the struggle we endured. I see resilience. I see the bond that survived everything. Leo lies stretched on the grass, his breath steady, his eyes half closed in the fading light. He is not a beast, not a monster, not a symbol of danger. He is living proof that courage can outlast fear, and that family can take many forms, even those with fur and claws. As the sun dips below the rooftops and the crickets begin their nightly song, I whisper to him the same words I always do. We made it, buddy. Against all odds, we made it. And in the deep, rolling purr that answers me, I hear the promise of tomorrow, calmer, brighter, freer. A new dawn. In the end, Willow Creek Estates would never be the same. The battles, the meetings, the shouting matches in driveways, they all faded into stories told in hushed tones at backyard barbecues. The HOA lost its iron grip, its leader stripped of power and pride. And in his absence, something unexpected happened. The community softened. Neighbors began to see not just a lion, but a bond. Not just a rule broken, but a lesson learned. For Sarah, the fight was never about winning or losing. It was about Leo, about family, about refusing to bow down when love itself was on trial. She stood against fear, against prejudice, against control, and she stood tall. Today, Leo still stretches out in the sunlight, his mane golden in the evening glow, while Sarah watches from her porch. To outsiders, it may look unusual, even impossible. But to those who lived through it, it's a reminder of resilience. Some say a neighborhood is defined by its fences, its rules, its sameness. But Sarah's story proves something different. That true community is defined by courage, by compassion, and by the families we dare to protect, no matter what form they take. Because sometimes, the wildest battles don't happen in jungles or deserts. They happen right here, in the suburbs, and sometimes, against all odds, the heart wins.